Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. The dashboard clock glowed orange, showing the late hour as I drove along the familiar blacktop of Township Road 40. This road stretched for miles through Ohio farmland. I had traveled it hundreds of times during quiet nights under the dark sky. My headlights cut through the darkness, pressing in from tree lines, illuminating the immediate path and empty fields beyond the pavement. The engine made a steady sound, filling the car as I moved across the deserted road. Ahead, a figure appeared by the pavement's edge. A man stood near the ditch, alone on the shoulder. His arm lifted, signaling for help, and his posture indicated an injury. My instinct was to slow the car, but a cold unease prickled my skin, overriding that first reaction. His gaze fixed past my headlights, deep into the blackness of the field. My foot stayed on the accelerator. As my car drew parallel, his body coiled. He lunged with surprising speed directly at the side of my moving vehicle, an animalistic movement in the bright glare of my headlights. The side mirror showed him stumbling back into the ditch as my car surged forward. Pure terror replaced unease with a certainty of immediate danger. My hands gripped the wheel, and I pressed the accelerator pedal to the floor. The engine roared as the car shot forward down the dark road. My headlights cut into the blackness, and then a new figure appeared in the beam. A second man stepped from the tree line, directly into the road ahead. He stood there, blocking my path, his deliberate presence confirming the ambush. I stomped hard on the brake pedal, the tires screaming against the pavement as the car skidded sideways. It missed the man by inches as I wrestled the wheel, correcting the swerve. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold dread filling me. The car straightened, speeding past the man and into the clear, and I understood the imminent danger of stopping. Finally, inside my house, I leaned against the kitchen counter, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands still trembled as I dialed the non-emergency number. The dispatcher put me through to a deputy, and I began recounting the events, my voice thin. The deputy listened without any change in his tone. When I finished, he spoke with a calm, practiced ease. "That's the injured person tactic," he said. "It's a common setup on those remote roads. They pretend to be stranded or injured. When someone slows down to help, or even just to pass, others are waiting." His words were devoid of surprise, describing a widespread operation familiar to him. It happens more often than people realize, especially at night. My private terror now broadened, revealing this specific threat as a common danger woven into the fabric of ordinary journeys across the land. Township Road 40 is now a route I never take. That night dismantled any feeling of security, leaving behind a deep distrust. The quiet comfort of night drives had vanished completely. A persistent unease remains, a cold presence that never leaves. I think of the men waiting there, and I wonder how many other drivers were not as lucky. A chilling vulnerability settled in, a lasting part of me. I always walked late, a habit born from living alone and claiming my own schedule. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty sidewalks, marking my familiar route. This path belonged to me in those hours, a stretch of asphalt and concrete winding through quiet suburban blocks that slept soundly. I often plugged in my headphones, the music a gentle backdrop to the rhythmic crunch of my sneakers. My thoughts drifted freely, unburdened by the day's demands or anyone else's expectations. This was my time, a chosen solitude that felt like pure independence. I inhaled the cool night air, clean and crisp, and each breath tasted of personal freedom. The houses I passed were dark, their windows dark panes, contributing to the peaceful isolation. I knew every crack in the pavement, every overgrown bush, every leaning mailbox along this stretch. It was a comforting sameness, a predictable pattern I had built for myself. I moved with an easy stride, my pace steady and unhurried. The world felt distant, a gentle sound beyond my immediate space, allowing me to simply be present in the moment. Each walk solidified a new part of my life, a space carved out just for me, where my concerns simply faded into the night. Tonight, Chris walked beside me. His hand found mine, and his quiet presence offered a different comfort on my usual route. We rounded the corner onto Willow Street, the same quiet blocks I knew so well. I still listened to music, though at a lower volume now, and Chris hummed along to a tune I had chosen. The night air was mild, and the streetlights cast long, familiar shadows ahead of us. We walked for a while, just talking in low voices, enjoying the calm familiarity of the street. Then I saw him, far ahead, walking on the opposite side of the street. It was a person, a dark shape against the distant glow of the streetlights. The figure moved slowly, a deliberate pace that seemed out of place for a casual late-night stroll. It turned its head and looked directly back at us. I felt a small, quick jolt in my chest, a sudden awareness that felt like a chill despite the mild air. The figure looked back again after only a few more steps, its head tilted slightly, maintaining its steady gaze for several seconds. Chris felt my hand tighten in his and he looked at me. A question forming in his and he looked at me. The person stopped walking. It stood perfectly still and watched us approach. Its movements were too precise, too measured for a passerby. The street had been peacefully quiet moments before, but now it held a watchful, almost predatory presence. My steps felt less rhythmic, more hesitant now. The quiet street, usually my haven, now felt open and exposed under the gaze of that distant person. Chris cleared his throat, a soft, dry sound. He said nothing, but I felt his gaze shift from me to the figure ahead, a shared unease growing between us. The person resumed its slow walk, but kept looking over its shoulder at us. It turned its head every few steps, a steady, unsettling rhythm, its face indistinct in the distance, but its intent gaze somehow palpable. The familiar houses we passed seemed to hold their breath behind their dark windows, no longer offering a comforting backdrop. My usual comfort evaporated slowly with each of the figure's backward glances. This familiar route no longer felt like mine. It now belonged to the strange, distant figure, its very presence claiming the space. The cool night air suddenly felt sharper against my skin. The steady rhythm of our walk had broken, replaced by an uneasy silence between Chris and me as we continued our path, acutely aware of the eyes on us. The feeling of being watched intensified with every stride. The figure on the far side of the street disappeared behind a wide metal street sign. I watched the spot where he had been. My grip tightened on Chris's hand, a silent question passing between us. A car approached from behind us, its headlights cutting through the night. The beam swept over the sign and, for a moment, illuminated the figure crouching behind the pole. The deliberate concealment itself confirmed a malicious intent. Chris pulled my hand, a signal, and we both pivoted without a word, heading back in the direction we had just arrived from. Our steps quickened, yet we moved to avoid sound, our sneakers making little noise on the pavement. The night air felt cold against my face. We kept our heads forward, trying not to look back, but awareness settled over my senses. The distant figure remained visible on the opposite side of the street. Its pace matched ours as it continued to follow. The streetlights cast long shadows, making every doorway and parked car feel like a potential hiding place. My chest felt tight, the air thick and difficult to draw. A need for distance propelled us forward, while the trailing figure maintained its watch, a constant reminder on the familiar street. Then, from down the street, headlights appeared, cutting through the darkness. The Uber. A surge of desperate hope filled my chest. I pulled Chris toward the curb, breaking into a run. Our feet slapped on the pavement, a sudden cacophony after our silent retreat. I dared a quick glance back. The figure across the street had quickened its pace, maintaining the distance, a slow, unhurried pursuit. It was not a sprint, but a steady, relentless closing of the gap. The car pulled up to us. Chris wrenched open the back door. I scrambled inside, shoving myself against the far door. Chris followed, slamming the door shut with a solid thud. I leaned forward, my breath catching, and gasped the destination address to the driver. He nodded, confused by our sudden entry, and pulled away from the curb. I pressed my face to the window, watching the street recede. The distant figure stood still now, a dark silhouette under the streetlight, its head turned toward our departing car. It remained there, watching us until we rounded the next corner, and it disappeared from view. The sudden speed of the car felt like a physical wrench from danger. My heart pounded against my ribs, a rapid, frantic rhythm. Chris reached for my hand again, his grip tight and reassuring. We sat in silence, the quiet drone of the car engine replacing the terrifying sound of our own hurried steps. The streetlights outside blurred into streaks of light, a sudden rush of normalcy that felt utterly alien. My breathing began to even out, but the shaking in my hands would not stop. The terror lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. It was not the terror of an immediate chase, but the unsettling dread of a patient hunter. That figure had not rushed, had not panicked, only matched our pace. It had waited, observed, and moved with a chilling deliberation. The idea settled into my mind that this was not a random encounter or a simple scare. It felt like something far more deliberate, far more predatory. The familiar comfort of my late-night walks was gone, replaced by a lingering shadow, and the true reason for the stalker's presence remained a terrifying, unanswered question. The ringing tore into my exhaustion. My shift had ended 2 hours ago, but the hospital still clung to me, its fluorescent glare imprinted behind my eyes. I fumbled for the phone, the screen blinding me with Aunt Martha's name. My voice came out rough, a dry rasp. Martha's words were a choked sob, urgent and fractured. "Uncle David was sick," she said. "Really sick." I pulled myself from the armchair, the worn fabric leaving indentations on my skin. The drive across town felt longer than usual. Streetlights blurred into streaks against the dark windows. My headlights cut through the night, illuminating familiar suburban houses that now seemed to watch me. A knot tightened in my stomach. Martha never called unless it was dire. The front door of their house stood ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me inside. I pushed it open. Martha was in the living room, huddled on the sofa, her face puffy and tear-streaked. She looked older, her usually vibrant hair disheveled. "David was upstairs," she whispered, too afraid to go near him again. I climbed the carpeted stairs, each step muffled. A gurgling sound emanated from their bedroom. The air grew thick, carrying a strange, almost metallic scent. I pushed the door open. Uncle David lay propped against pillows, his eyes wide and unfocused. His face was pale, glistening with sweat. His usually robust frame looked shrunken. "Jen," he rasped, his voice a struggle. I moved closer, my nurse's instincts kicking in despite the rising dread. He tried to speak again, but a spasm racked his body, and he clapped a hand over his mouth. A thin, dark fluid seeped between his fingers. He whimpered. "Let me see, Uncle David," I said, my voice firm but gentle. He slowly removed his hand. I saw it then. My breath caught in my throat. His mouth was not merely infected. It was a grotesque landscape of horror. The entire inside of his mouth, from his gums to his tongue, was covered in dark, irregular holes. They were not static. They writhed. Each opening pulsated, a tiny, dark cavern that stretched and then rapidly constricted like a living organism. There were dozens of them, clustered together, some larger than others, all a deep, unsettling black. A viscous, thick fluid oozed from their edges. The raw red tissue around them was inflamed. One particularly large hole on his lower gum stretched wide, then snapped shut with a sickening wet click. I saw movement deep within it, something dark and worm-like retracting into the depths. My stomach lurched. I fought down the nausea. This was beyond anything I had ever seen in the ER, beyond any medical textbook. "It hurts," David mumbled, tears welling in his eyes. "It's growing." I forced myself to maintain a professional demeanor. I reached for his wrist, feeling for his pulse. It was thready and fast. His skin felt clammy. This was not a simple infection. This was something alien, something monstrous. "We need to get you to the hospital, Uncle David," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Getting him into my car was a difficult task. Martha watched from the porch, her face a mask of terror. Angie, my young cousin, peeked from behind her, her eyes wide and frightened. She was just 8 years old. I tried to offer a reassuring smile, but I knew it looked weak. The drive to St. Jude's was agonizing. Every bump in the road seemed to cause David more pain. He gagged several times, the gurgling sounds from his mouth filling the small space of my car. I called ahead, informing the ER about a severe, unknown oral infection. At the hospital, the nurses and doctors shared my shocked expressions. No one had an answer. Dr. Evans, the attending physician, a seasoned veteran, examined David with a look of utter bewilderment. He used a tongue depressor to gently push back David's lips, revealing the horrifying network of pulsating holes. His brow furrowed in concentration. He called for an infectious disease consult, a microbiology panel, and biopsies. David was admitted, isolated in a private room. The staff moved with a practiced efficiency, but I saw the fear in their eyes. I stayed until David was settled. Then I returned to my aunt's house. Martha had calmed down slightly, but her face remained drawn. "Angie needs to get away from here," I told her. "I can take her for a few days." Martha nodded, her eyes distant. Angie stood by the door, clutching a worn teddy bear. Her small face was pale. I knelt down, trying to smile at her. "Hey, Bug, how about a sleepover at my place?" Angie looked up at her mother, then back at me. She nodded slowly. The drive to my apartment was quiet. Angie sat in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed out the window. She did not speak. The oppressive feeling from my uncle's house seemed to have followed us. My apartment, usually a haven, felt different. It was smaller, somehow less secure. I put Angie to bed in the guest room, tucking her in and leaving a nightlight on. She held her teddy bear tightly. I collapsed onto my own bed. My head throbbed. The image of Uncle David's mouth swam behind my closed eyelids. The retracting holes, the dark fluid, the movement within them. It was a vision that would haunt my dreams. Exhaustion finally claimed me. I woke in darkness, unable to move. My body felt heavy, glued to the mattress. Fear seized me. I recognized this sensation. Sleep paralysis. My eyes darted around the room, trying to pierce the gloom. Shapes coalesced in the periphery, shifting and indistinct. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Then, a pressure began to build inside my own mouth. It started as a dull ache, then intensified rapidly. My tongue felt swollen, thick, too large for my mouth. I tried to swallow, but I could not. My jaw ached. I wanted to open my mouth, to gasp for air, but my muscles refused to obey. The pressure grew. It felt like something was pushing its way through the delicate tissues of my gums, tearing through the roof of my mouth. A sickening sensation, like soft cartilage being stretched and perforated. I could not scream. I could not move. The pain sharpened, becoming unbearable. It was a tearing, piercing pain. I felt a liquid well up in my mouth, warm and metallic. It filled my throat. I gagged, but my body remained immobile. The taste of blood coated my tongue. Then the feeling shifted. It was no longer just pain. It was a sensation of movement. Tiny, pulsating shifts. A multitude of openings forming. Dark, contracting caverns. Each one stretching, then snapping shut. I felt them across my palate, along my gums, even on the surface of my tongue. They were living, burrowing things, consuming the flesh from within. A deep, visceral terror gripped me. This was Uncle David's affliction. It was happening to me. I heard a wet, clicking sound coming from inside my head, a sound that resonated deep in my bones. It was the sound of the holes retracting. I struggled against the paralysis, desperate to break free, to check my mouth, to scream. My body remained a prison. The horror intensified, then abruptly released its grip. My eyes snapped open. I gasped, a ragged, desperate sound. My body was free. I sat bolt upright, heart hammering against my ribs. My mouth felt dry, tasted metallic. I scrambled out of bed, rushing to the bathroom. I flicked on the light, the sudden brightness stinging my eyes. I stared into the mirror, pulling back my lips. My reflection stared back, pale and terrified. My mouth was normal, perfectly normal. There was no sign of holes, no lesions, no dark fluid. Just my own trembling, horrified face. I splashed cold water on my face, gasping for air. The dream had been too real, too vivid. The sensation of the holes, the taste of blood, the clicking sounds. It had all been horrifyingly precise. I leaned against the cold porcelain sink, my legs weak. The dread remained. The horror I had witnessed in Uncle David was now rooted deep within me, an indelible mark on my consciousness. I was awake, but the terror had not vanished. It lingered, a tangible presence in the quiet apartment, a dark seed planted in the fertile ground of my mind. The dream's chill clung to me as I dressed. My hands trembled as I pulled on fresh scrubs, the fabric feeling alien against my skin. Uncle David needed me at the hospital. I had to know what was happening to him, had to understand what monstrous thing now infected his body. The lingering taste of metallic dread from my dream still soured my mouth. I backed my car out of the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel. The city was just beginning to stir, a gray pre-dawn light smudging the sky. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen, my heart jumping. It was Angie. My blood ran cold. She was alone in the apartment. I answered, my voice tight with urgency. "Angie, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Her voice came through the speaker, small and trembling. "Jen, it's dark. I heard a noise. I think someone is here." My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Angie, listen to me. Did you lock the door after I put you to bed?" "Yes, I locked it," she whimpered. "But I heard a noise, like a scrape, near the window." My mind raced. "Go hide, Angie. Get into the closet. Call 911 right now." "I'm scared," she cried. "It feels cold." A low, guttural rasp sounded from her end of the line, a sound like dry leaves being dragged across concrete. It was not a human voice. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. "What was that, Angie? What do you hear?" "A noise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Something is moving." Then, her breath hitched. "Jen, the door to the living room just opened." My stomach dropped. "Angie, stay on the phone with me." "Are you hiding?" "No. I'm in the hall. It's dark here. I can see it. Something is moving in the living room. It's big, but I can't see it. Her voice grew frantic. It's just air moving, but it's pushing things. I heard a crash, then the sound of glass breaking. A lamp shattered. Angie, are you okay? Where are you now? I yelled into the phone, my own voice hoarse with terror. It's coming closer, she shrieked. It's in the hall, I hear a whisper. The sound on her end shifted. It was a voice, distorted and wet, like a human mouth filled with thick fluid. It spoke my name. Jen, it wants you. My blood ran cold. Angie, that's not me. Run. Hide. It's talking, Angie cried, her voice rising in pitch. It sounds like Mama, but it's not Mama. It's saying my name. The distorted voice spoke again, closer this time to Angie's microphone. Angie, sweetie, come here. It was a sickening imitation of Aunt Martha's soft tone, but warped, grotesque. No, Angie screamed, her fear now a raw, gut-wrenching sound. I heard scuffling, the distinct sound of a small body being dragged, furniture scraping across the floor. It's got me, she wailed. It's pulling me. Jen. Her scream was cut short by a wet, tearing sound, followed by a choked gurgle. The line went dead. A cold, empty dread washed over me, numbing me from the inside out. My foot remained pressed to the floor, the car hurtling through the awakening streets. The rising sun, once a promise of a new day, now felt like a cruel mockery. Angie was gone. Taken. My little cousin, alone, snatched by an invisible horror. I could do nothing but drive, my heart a hollow, echoing chamber of despair. The car screeched to a halt in front of my apartment building. My legs moved on their own, carrying me from the driver's seat. The front door of my unit stood wide open, a dark opening in the morning light. I pushed it further, stepping into the living room. The sight assaulted my eyes. The coffee table lay on its side, splintered wood scattered across the rug. The sofa cushions were tossed, exposing the frame beneath. Books from the shelves were strewn across the floor, their pages ripped. A lamp lay shattered, its shade crushed, wires exposed. A cold draft snaked around my ankles. Angie's small shoes lay kicked into the corner, one on top of the other, a small, abandoned pile. My gaze swept across the chaos, trying to find some meaning in the destruction. There was no sign of Angie. My eyes landed on Angie's backpack, half hidden beneath an overturned chair. A strap was torn, the material frayed. A thin notebook, brightly colored, had fallen out. Its cover showed a sparkly unicorn. My hands trembled as I picked it up. This was Angie's diary, containing her secret thoughts. The script was careful, sometimes wobbly. I sank to the floor, ignoring the broken glass. My fingers traced the unicorn, then opened the cover. The first entries were mundane, typical childhood observations. Then the tone shifted. Mama said Uncle David got sick from a germ. I think it was Mr. Min's germ. A cold sensation ran down my spine. Uncle David. See. August 18th. Jen left the porch light on. Mr. Min doesn't like the light. He went back into the dark. But he was closer this time. He was right at the edge of the lawn. See. My heart pounded in my chest. He was watching. He was approaching. See, August 20th. I locked the window good today. Jen said no monsters can get in when everything is locked. But I saw Mr. Min's eye at the glass. The eye was big and black. My breath hitched. He had been at the window. August 21st. Jen went to the hospital. Mr. Min kept making sounds outside. I tried to cover my ears. Then I heard him in the living room. It was very dark. He spoke in Mama's voice, saying my name. He reached for me. He's going to make holes, like Uncle David. He knows I am scared. Jen, help me. The last words formed a desperate plea, smeared across the page. There was no more writing. The page ended abruptly. The date was today's date. My hands fell to my lap, the diary slipping from my grasp. Mr. Min. Mr. Min was an invisible horror, a silent stalker. He was capable of mimicking loved ones, causing a grotesque affliction and breaching locked doors. And he had taken Angie. Nausea rolled through me. The sensation was deep and visceral. My tongue felt thick in my mouth, heavy. A dull ache began in my gums. The familiar metallic taste coated my tongue. A sudden sharp pain flared on my lower gum. It was the exact spot where I had seen the large hole retracting in Uncle David's mouth. My throat closed. I swallowed, a dry, painful gulp. My dream had not been a dream. The terror had been paralyzing. The sensation had been tearing. The dark holes forming inside my mouth had been real. It had been a symptom. Mr. Min had left his mark. The entity had touched me. The infection was inside me now. It was already beginning. I was the next one. The holes would come. They would grow. There was no escape. The summer days stretched out before me, an empty expanse of hours, so I started walking. My feet carried me down a path I had not taken before, past the usual neighborhood houses and into the tall, swaying grass. The trees grew thicker here, forming a dense wall of green, and then the air shifted, carrying the cool scent of water. I pushed through a final curtain of leaves, and a body of water opened up before me, sparkling under the bright sun. An unusual urge pulled at me, a sudden desire to shed the heavy stillness of the day and immerse myself. My clothes dropped quickly to the grassy bank, and I stepped into the water. The coolness embraced my skin, a startling shock. I pushed off, letting my body glide through the clear water. I swam for what felt like a long time back and forth across the quiet expanse. Later, as I climbed out onto the bank, the sunlight warm on my skin, I dried off with my discarded shirt. My gaze fell upon my forearm, and I saw a small red mark. It was a raised patch of skin about the size of a coin. I touched it lightly, feeling its slightly rough texture, and then shrugged it off, assuming it was a minor irritation from the plant life around the lake. The red mark on my forearm expanded during the night. Its edges blurred into my skin, and the color deepened. I woke with a prickling sensation that turned into a deep, persistent itch. By morning, the patch had grown to cover half my forearm. It felt warmer than the skin around it, a dull heat radiating from beneath. A distinct bulge rose from the center, a firm mound visible on my arm. I watched it intently, seeing a subtle shift, a slow undulation just under the skin. My stomach clenched with a knot of growing fear. I covered the arm with long sleeves, but the movement continued, a disturbing presence under my clothes. The lump pulsed, a soft beat I felt against my flesh. My sleep became restless, haunted by the feeling of something alive inside me. Panic tightened around my chest. I called Dr. Rodney's office and secured an emergency appointment. Dr. Rodney examined my arm with a serious look. He pressed the lump with care, his brow furrowed. He spoke in a measured way, explaining a parasitic infection. He said it was a chorid, a rare organism found in fresh water, certainly from the lake. He confirmed it had attached itself to my muscle tissue. The problem was its removal. Standard medical procedures would not work. The creature would only burrow deeper, grow larger, and become impossible to extract. He slid a sterile tray across the table. It held a scalpel, a small pair of forceps, and a shallow bowl. He looked at me with an unsettling intensity. He explained the extraction must occur during a specific lunar phase, a time when the chorid would surface slightly. He described the precise incision, the careful manipulation, the moment I would have to pull it free. He emphasized, I must complete this alone, in complete solitude, to prevent the chorid from sensing another presence and retreating deeper. A chilling dread settled over me as I left the office. The knowledge of the alien life growing within me, coupled with the terrible requirement for its removal, wrapped around me, isolating me completely from the normal world. A churning sensation in my gut, sharper than any dread, told me the time had come. The moon, a sliver outside my window, cast a dim light into the room. I laid out the sterile tray Dr. Rodney had provided, the gleaming instruments reflecting the faint light. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the scalpel, its edge catching a glint. The lump on my forearm pulsed with a distinct, hungry rhythm, pushing against my skin. I took a deep breath, steadying my arm, and made the incision Dr. Rodney had described. A searing pain shot through my arm, forcing a gasp from my lips. Something squirmed violently beneath the skin, pushing and tearing at the wound. A slick, black mass began to emerge from the incision. It writhed, segmented and wet, its bulbous, eyeless head pushing through, followed by its long, glistening body. It detached with a sickening wet sound, falling onto the sterile towel I had placed on the floor. For a moment, it lay there, a writhing parasite. Then a horrifying transformation began. Thin, sharp legs erupted from its sides with audible clicks. Its body elongated, hardening, and a wide, serrated maw opened at its head, dripping a clear, viscous fluid onto the towel. The air filled with a putrid stench. It lunged, a sudden, horrifying speed, its newly formed claws tearing at the towel. I scrambled back, knocking over the lamp. Darkness descended, broken only by the dim streetlights filtering through the window, casting long, distorted shadows. I grabbed the scalpel, my hand shaking violently. The creature hissed, a sound of pure malice, its claws scraping against the floorboards as it moved with unnatural speed. It was fast, relentless, a nightmare given grotesque form. I swung the scalpel in a desperate arc, feeling the blade sink into its flesh with a wet crunch. It shrieked, a piercing, guttural sound that echoed in the small room. The creature thrashed, its legs kicking wildly, before its movements slowly ceased. Its body began to dissolve, a putrid greenish liquid bubbling from its form, leaving a foul odor that clung to everything. I stared at the dissolving mass, my body shaking uncontrollably, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The immediate terror subsided, replaced by a hollow ache, a deep violation that settled into my bones. My arm throbbed, a dull, constant pain, but the physical wound felt insignificant compared to the raw, visceral trauma. The image of the lake, dark and inviting under the moonlight, rose in my mind with an undeniable pull. A strange longing, an illogical attraction, tugged at me, a quiet compulsion to return to the water where it all began, where the thing had waited. I watched the green canopy of the jungle unfold below our helicopter. My husband Ian squeezed my hand beside me. Our junior researcher Mohammed pointed with excitement at a winding river below. This corporate grant expedition represented a dream for us, searching for new insect species in unexplored territories. The steady drone of the rotor blades was a constant companion to our light-hearted chatter. Ian recounted a funny story from a previous field trip, making Mohammed laugh. The gruff pilot chuckled from the cockpit. We felt a shared sense of purpose and anticipation, a collective excitement for the discoveries waiting beneath the dense foliage. Then a metallic screech tore through the cabin. A red warning light flashed on the control panel. The pilot yelled something I could not understand over the craft's violent shuddering. My body slammed against the restraint harness as the helicopter twisted. The world outside became a chaotic blur of green and brown. A sickening lurch propelled us downward. There was a deafening impact, then darkness swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes, a sharp pain pierced my temple. I tasted blood. Mohammed groaned somewhere nearby. My husband Ian remained still, slumped against the shattered side of the cabin. The pilot's seat was empty, and the front of the helicopter had simply ceased to exist. I pushed against the crushed metal, pain flaring across my ribs. My head throbbed. Ian groaned beside me, his eyes fluttering open. Mohammed coughed, a sticky red stain on his chin. We needed to move. The wreckage was dangerous. The thick jungle grew all around us, hot and claustrophobic. A jagged opening in the rock face caught my attention, a dark slit against the dense green foliage. It offered a chance of temporary safety. We stumbled towards it, supporting each other. Inside, the air grew cooler and drier, a welcome shift from the humid oppressiveness of the jungle. We found a small alcove and collapsed onto the rough stone floor, breathing raggedly. My scientific instincts, dulled by the crash, began to stir. The cave was deep, stretching further into the earth. A strange, intermittent light pulsed from within. Curiosity, a strong force, pulled me forward despite the pain. I moved slowly, deeper into the rock. The passage widened into a vast cavern. Before me, a colossal structure filled the space. It was a hive, immense and luminous. It glowed with shifting colors, a vibrant display of light. Its surface swarmed with insects, unlike any I had ever witnessed. Their bodies were sleek black. Their wings shimmered with many bright colors, catching the cave's inner light. They moved with synchronized precision. My breath caught in my throat. This was not just a new species. This was an entirely new order of life, a significant biological find hidden from the world. A strong excitement surged through me, pushing away the lingering fear and pain. This discovery was monumental. The beauty vanished in an instant. A collective shriek erupted from the hive, a sound that pierced my ears and rattled my teeth. Thousands of the iridescent insects launched themselves from the luminous surface, a cloud of black and shimmering color. They streaked towards the alcove where Ian and Mohammed rested. I shouted a warning, but it was too late. The swarm enveloped them both in a furious shroud. I saw Ian flail, swatting uselessly. Mohammed screamed as he collapsed to the stone floor. Then the insects withdrew as suddenly as they had attacked, leaving them covered in red welts. I rushed to them, my heart pounding. Ian's welts already began to swell, turning purple. Mohammed's face was contorted in pain. He pointed a hand at his arm where the skin stretched tight and glossy. A ripple moved beneath the surface, slow and deliberate. Then the ripples intensified, growing into bulges. The skin darkened further, taking on a bruised, mottled appearance. Ian clawed at his chest, gasping for air. His shirt was already tight against his expanding frame. A network of corded veins pulsed violently beneath his skin, stark and black. The bulges became more defined, shifting and pushing. I watched in horror as a living, sinuous form began to trace its path just beneath his flesh. It coiled, extended, then coiled again. The grotesque movement was undeniable. Something was growing, alive and alien, using his body as its host. Mohammed whimpered, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. A similar serpentine shape writhed beneath the skin of his throat, pressing outwards, visible and monstrous. Their bodies were no longer entirely their own. They were becoming vessels, living incubators for the horrifying new life. A cold dread seeped into my bones, replacing all scientific wonder with horror. Ian writhed on the stone, his body convulsing violently. His skin, stretched to its limit, began to tear along the swelling lines. A sickening ripping sound filled the cavern. Black liquid seeped from the ruptures. Then, with a sudden, grotesque burst, multiple insects tore free from his chest, his stomach, his limbs. They were fully formed, the same iridescent black creatures from the hive, wet and glistening, their wings still folded. They scattered across the rock floor, each one pausing, then launching into the air. Ian screamed, a raw, guttural sound that abruptly cut off. His eyes stared blankly, his body now a hollowed ruin. Muhammad watched, his mouth open in a silent scream. The serpentine forms beneath his skin thrashed with renewed urgency. His chest began to heave. I saw the same dark fluid bloom under his skin, then the ruptures, the grotesque tearing. Muhammad's body spasmed. More insects, identical to those from Ian, erupted from him, glistening and black. They scrambled away, taking to the air with a quick flutter of wings. Muhammad's body slumped, lifeless. My mind shattered. This was not just a new species, it was a parasitic terror. The insects used living bodies as incubators, bursting forth to continue their horrifying cycle. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the rough cave wall. The air buzzed with the wing beats of the newly born insects. They circled once, then darted towards the colossal hive, joining their brethren. My blood ran cold. I had to escape. The cave was a tomb. I stumbled over the uneven ground, not looking back at the mangled bodies of my husband and friend. The light from the hive pulsed behind me, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to chase me. I ran, my lungs burning, my legs aching through the narrow passage, desperate for the outside. The thought of those grotesque organisms growing inside me, waiting to burst forth, drove me faster than any pain. I burst from the cave entrance, gasping for air, into the dense green jungle. The humid air felt suffocating, but it was freedom from the immediate horror. I ran until exhaustion claimed me, then walked, pushing through the tangled undergrowth, driven by a primal need to survive, to escape the monstrosity I had witnessed. Days blurred into an agonizing struggle against hunger, thirst, and fear. I fought off fever, hallucinations. Just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, a faint drone reached my ears. A helicopter, small and distant, appeared through the canopy. I screamed, waved my arms, poured every last ounce of my strength into attracting its attention. It descended, a rescue team emerging, their faces a mixture of relief and concern. They took me back to civilization, to sterile rooms and concerned doctors. My body healed, but my mind was irrevocably scarred. The images of Ian and Muhammad, of the insects bursting forth, replayed endlessly. I tried to explain, but my words sounded like madness. I knew the truth, a horrifying biological reality. This new species, beautiful and deadly, reproduced with terrifying efficiency, turning hosts into vessels, exploding forth to spread. The cave was just one hive. There could be others. I imagined them multiplying, spreading across the globe, an unstoppable plague incubating in the unsuspecting. The world was unaware. I alone knew the truth, a terrible burden that would haunt every waking moment. The key scraped against the lock of apartment 3B. I pushed the door inward. The scent of old wood filled the air. My son, Leo, gripped my hand, his face bright with curiosity. Our dog, Charlie, nudged past my legs. His tail moved slowly. This was it, our new home. We had left the shouting behind, the constant apprehension. I had promised Leo a safe place, a fresh beginning for just us two and Charlie. The living room was spacious, shadows stretched across the floor from the late afternoon sun. Sunlight poured through a grimy window, illuminating the room. Charlie sniffed a corner. A low rumble sounded in his chest. I tried to dismiss it, knowing the apartment was simply new to him. Leo ran to the window, looking out at the street below. He pointed to a small park across the way. A weight lifted from my chest. A sense of quiet relief filled me. We unpacked a few boxes, placing Leo's dinosaur toy on the mantelpiece. The apartment felt vacant, but also held the promise of a peaceful future. Leo's laughter echoed a little too loudly in the bare rooms. He chased Charlie through the hallway, their playful sounds a new song in the space. As evening came, a quiet settled over us, a genuine calm I had not known in a long time. The old building creaked around us. Floorboards above us groaned. It was an old structure, I considered. Just an old place. I watched Leo sleep, his breathing soft. Charlie lay by his bed, his ears flicking now and then. I lay in my own bed, listening. The sounds were simply the settling of an old building. I held on to this thought, trying to embrace the quiet. Yet a subtle chill lingered in the corners of the rooms, a coldness that did not belong with the warmth of our fresh start. The quiet I had welcomed did not last. Soon new sounds joined the old building's creaks. Scratches scraped against the wall behind Leo's bed. Sometimes a low dragging sound came from beyond the plaster. Charlie would rise from his sleep, his ears swiveling. A rumble sounded in his chest. His tail remained still. I tried to dismiss these sounds, blaming the old building, but Charlie's distress grew each night. He paced the apartment after dark, nose pressed against the baseboards, letting out soft whimpers that echoed through the quiet rooms. One morning, a small dark mark appeared on the wall beside Leo's bed, directly opposite the hallway door. It was tiny. I touched it, feeling dust on my fingertip. I told myself it was just old plaster flaking away. Days blurred into a restless sequence, filled with the demands of finding work and the unsettling awareness of the apartment's changing atmosphere. The small mark on the wall grew. Each time I looked, it seemed a little wider, a little deeper, its edges rough and uneven. A perpetual chill settled in our living room, making me pull my sweater tighter even when the sun streamed through the window. Charlie's behavior worsened. He began sleeping curled against my bedroom door, growling at nothing visible in the hallway. Sometimes I would wake to a scratching at the wall where the hole now stood. It was a raw sound that vibrated through the floorboards. I filled the growing cavity with spackle, then with paper, then with wadded cloth. Each morning the barrier had been pushed out. The hole was larger than before, exposing dark space within. I could hear a breeze passing through it, carrying a draft. Sleep vanished. My eyes burned with exhaustion. Every shadow held a new shape. Every quiet moment brought fresh anticipation. Then Leo started talking about the man. He described a tall man with a beard in his bedroom doorway at night. "He just watches me, Mama," Leo whispered. His hand clutched my shirt, his eyes wide with fear. I held him close, telling him it was only a dream or a shadow. His terror chilled me. He refused to sleep alone, demanding Charlie in his room and the hallway light on. Charlie lay by Leo's bed. His growls were softer, sounding protective, but his hackles remained raised. I would find them both huddled together in the early hours. Leo's face was tear-streaked. Charlie panted, his eyes fixed on the empty doorway. I sat by his bed for hours after he fell asleep, staring at the doorway, searching for any sign of a form. I saw nothing. The hole continued to grow, a tear in the plaster. Sounds emanated from it, not just scratches, but a rhythmic tapping came from deep within the wall. I heard whispers too indistinct to form words, but clear enough to be distinct from the usual building noises. The whispers seemed to coil out from the dark space behind the plaster. My patience wore thin, stretched by sleepless nights and the strangeness of our home. I felt on edge, my nerves frayed. I snapped at Leo for small things, then regretted it, seeing the fear deepen in his eyes. The weight of the inexplicable settled over me. I was a mother, protecting her son, but felt powerless against the forces invading our new home. The apartment, once a promise of peace, now held me prisoner in its unease. I watched Charlie one night. His body trembled, staring at the wall. The tapping grew louder, resonating through the floorboards. The whispers rose in a chorus of indecipherable words, swirling from the growing hole. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sounds bled through, seeping into my mind. I could not escape. I could not endure the sounds anymore. I bought a sheet of drywall, clumsily carried it home, and patched the hole. I plastered over the new board, smoothing the surface with frantic hands. The wall looked solid again. For a brief moment, a desperate hope bloomed in my chest. That night, the apartment was quiet. I listened, my breath held tight. No tapping came. No whispers rose from the wall. The quiet felt heavy. A lid pressed down on the room. The new quiet did not last. A horror of another kind crept into the apartment. A smell began to grow. It started with a damp earth odor, then sharpened into something else. A sickly decay that clung to the air. It permeated everything. Our clothes carried it. The upholstery absorbed it. Even Leo's dinosaur toy smelled of it. I scrubbed the floors. I washed the walls. I opened windows to the cold outside, but the stench remained. It was heaviest around the patched wall, seeping through the new plaster, a putrid breath from the hidden space. Mold followed the smell. Dark patches bloomed on the ceiling in the hallway, near the sealed wall. They spread like stains, fuzzy and green, clinging to the paint. The air became thick, difficult to breathe. Leo coughed often. His eyes were red-rimmed. He stopped asking about the man. His spirit seemed to shrink. He no longer chased Charlie. He sat quietly, staring at nothing, his small shoulders hunched. When I tried to touch him, he flinched, pulling away from my hand. Our connection, once strong, felt thin. It frayed from the constant invasion. My own despair deepened into a crushing weight. Sleep offered no escape. The smell filled my dreams. The stifling air pressed against my chest. My temper flared easily. I snapped at Leo for spilling a drink or leaving a toy out. Guilt would wash over me, a colder wave than the chill in the apartment. I saw my own weariness in his haunted eyes. I had promised him a safe haven, but I had brought him to this rotting cage. The apartment was no longer a home. It was a prison. Each breath was a reminder of what festered behind the wall, a constant, sickening presence that consumed us all. Charlie's movements were slow. He huddled in corners, his whimpers constant, his fur dull, his bright eyes clouded with weary fear. I could not take it anymore. The decay was a physical pressure against my skin. I dialed the landlord's number, my fingers clumsy on the phone. A tremor ran through my voice as I explained the unbearable stench, the spreading mold, the sealed wall. I described Leo's cough, Charlie's constant whimpers, my own exhaustion. He sounded doubtful at first, but the desperation in my words reached him. He promised to visit the next morning. The landlord arrived early, his face tight with concern from the moment he stepped inside. The odor hit him immediately. He recoiled slightly, then walked directly to the sealed wall. He traced a finger along the line of dark, fuzzy mold creeping up from the baseboards. He pressed his hand against the drywall, then leaned closer, sniffing the putrid air. His expression hardened. "This is not right," he stated, his voice low. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in quick, hushed tones. He turned back to me. "A crew will be here this afternoon," he told me. His gaze remained fixed on the wall, a deep line forming between his brows. He looked at me then, his eyes holding a new, grave understanding. The renovation crew arrived a few hours later, 2 men dressed in rugged work clothes. They brought tools, a heavy canvas tarp, and large sheets of plastic. They spread the tarp over the living room floor, covering our few possessions. Then they secured the plastic sheets, creating a makeshift barrier around the wall. The men prepared to work. The power drill whirred, cutting through the plasterboard I had so frantically placed. Dust rose in clouds, making the air hazy. They pulled away the damaged sheet of drywall. The stench intensified immediately, gagging me. I led Leo and Charlie into the kitchen, shutting the door firmly. Charlie whimpered low in his throat, pressing his body against my legs. I held Leo close, feeling his small hands clutching my shirt. The sounds of breaking plaster and crumbling brick filled the entire apartment, vibrating through the floor and up my feet. The crew worked with a methodical rhythm. I heard the scrape of tools, the thud of falling debris, the grunt of effort. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to focus on Leo's quiet breathing, but the sounds from the next room were too insistent. Then the noise changed. The rhythmic scraping stopped abruptly. A sharp gasp came from one of the workers. Then a muttered exclamation. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I opened the kitchen door a fraction, peering through the gap. Dust still hung in the air, thick and oppressive, making it hard to see. One worker stood frozen, staring into the cavity where the wall had been. The other man knelt, his face pale, his hand covering his mouth in shock. My eyes followed their horrified gaze. The brickwork was gone. A dark, narrow space lay exposed within the structure of the building. And within that space, curled into a tight, impossible position, lay a body. It was a man, skeletal and shriveled, fused to the mortar and brick. His beard was a matted tangle against his jaw. His eyes were empty sockets, staring out into nothing. The terrifying truth struck me with brutal force. The apartment had not been haunted by a ghost, a specter from the other side. We had been living with a corpse, slowly decomposing behind Leo's wall. The stench, the spreading mold, the whispers, Leo's visions of the bearded man, Charlie's terror, all of it suddenly coalesced into a horrifying, sickening reality. Every strange sound, every unsettling feeling, every moment of fear now had a gruesome, tangible explanation. We had not been alone in Willow Manor. He had been there all along. The day after the discovery, we left Willow Manor. The air outside felt sharp against my skin, a clear difference from the rot we had endured. Leo rode in the back seat of the car, nestled beside Charlie. He looked out the window, his small face unreadable. I watched him in the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of lingering fear. I chose silence about the man in the wall. I did not want Leo to carry that image, that sickening knowledge, into his growing years. I held the belief that a child's mind could heal, that the softness of youth might erase the horror. We found a new apartment in a different town, a bright place filled with sunlight and devoid of history. Leo began to play again, his laughter sounding throughout the rooms as he chased Charlie. He drew pictures of friendly dinosaurs and bright suns. Sometimes a flicker of fear appeared in his eyes, a brief worry when a loud noise startled him, or when he woke from a dream. I would pull him close, murmuring reassurances. I pretended I did not see the momentary fear. I willed him to forget. The physical decay of Willow Manor had been removed. The building itself was torn down months later, its broken pieces hauled away. But the stench, the image of the man, the knowledge of his long, silent presence remained with me. It caused a coldness in my stomach when I remembered. It was a phantom smell when I closed my eyes. I slept less deeply than before, always listening, always remembering the whispers from the wall. The horror itself lived in my own mind. It became part of my new life, a constant reminder of the unseen things that can hide in plain sight. I lived with it, for Leo, and for the hope that he would truly be free. My cleaning shift on the tourist submarine always followed the same pattern. I moved methodically from the observation dome, wiping every viewport, to the passenger cabins, straightening pillows. The submarine was an empty metal tube at night, and I heard the steady groan of its structure settling in the water. I often felt eyes on me, a persistent prickle on my skin. When I entered the generator room, the emergency lights cast everything in a stark red glow. The heavy machinery sat cold and still around me. I checked the pressure gauges, my breath catching as a chorus of distinct voices whispered my name. The sound came from all directions, close and chilling, then abruptly stopped. I stood there, utterly alone, the quiet pressing down. The red eyes appeared everywhere, small and glowing like coals. They stared from the gaps of the wall panels. They watched me from the vents above the passenger beds. A pair emerged from a thin crack in the observation dome's glass, following my movements without a blink. The observation became a relentless presence. It pressed against the inside of my head, a pressure building behind my eyes. Then a thought arrived, clear and sharp, not my own. Give me the ring fingers of the passengers. That instruction repeated itself, ringing through my skull. A cold dread seized my stomach. I bolted through the deserted corridors of the submarine. Jerry sat in the galley, cleaning coffee grounds from the machine. "Jerry," I said, my voice hoarse. "The thing in the generator room, it spoke to me." Jerry continued wiping the machine, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not look up. "It always does," he said. "It wants ring fingers," I whispered, the words tasting foul, "of the patrons." Jerry stopped wiping and looked at me then, his eyes dark. "It needs them, Christopher. And it will take them." He returned to his cleaning, his voice soft but urgent. "You need to find out what it wants them for. You need to do it soon." I walked back to the generator room. The red light pulsed with the entity's presence. I stepped inside, my heart thudding against my ribs, and stared into the deepest corner where the voices had first come from. Red eyes blinked into existence there, more numerous than before, forming a shifting mass of light. They merged, then solidified into a dark, swirling form that expanded rapidly. Shadowy tendrils reached from the mass, coiling around my ankles, then my wrists. They pulled me forward, lifting me from the floor. I struggled against them, but they held me fast, cold. The darkness enveloped me completely, pressing in on my vision. Then I was somewhere else. I stood in a small apartment, the air still and heavy. The flickering lamplight showed me the overturned chair, the broken vase. My ex-wife lay on the floor, her eyes wide and staring. Blood stained the cheap rug. My hands were shaking, holding the kitchen knife I had used. The memory was sharp, the smells, the metallic taste in my mouth. I knelt beside her, the command already clear in my mind. Her hand was limp. I saw the gold band on her finger. The knife trembled in my grip. I pressed the blade against her skin, then cut. The bone grated, then snapped. The ring came free, wet and red. I dropped it to the floor. The tendrils tightened around me, squeezing. The memory dissolved. A sharp, searing pain erupted in my chest. It felt like something vital was being torn from me. A cold emptiness spread quickly through my veins. The pain intensified, then vanished abruptly, leaving a vacant hollowness in its place. I hung suspended, slack against the shadowy coils. The fear was gone. The revulsion had disappeared. There was only a clear, empty space inside me. The entity released me. I dropped to the floor, my legs steady beneath me. The red eyes watched, expectant. I felt ready. The demands were no longer terrifying. They were simply the next step. A cold emptiness filled me as I walked to the maintenance locker. My fingers closed around the bolt cutters, their heavy weight familiar in my grip. Jerry stood near the observation dome, his left hand resting against the curved glass, its ring finger completely gone. He watched me with a vacant stare. "Freedom has a cost," Jerry said, his voice raspy. I lowered my gaze to my own left hand, seeing the untouched flesh, the unblemished skin. A quiet certainty settled inside my chest. This was my purpose now, and the 9-fingered future stretched out before me, a relentless path I had to follow. I drove my lorry across England, day after day, just seeing endless traffic and concrete roads. Every mile pulled me further from my wife, and I hated being away from her so much. We often spoke about finding something different, a place where life moved slower. My wife loved the quiet of Ireland's rural southwest, the green fields and the fresh air, and I listened to her vision. We finally packed everything we owned and left the busy roads behind. We moved to Ireland. My new work routes hugged the coast, showing me crashing waves and towering cliffs. I found unexpected joy in this work, and then my wife told me she was pregnant. Our new life felt complete with the news. I loved my new work, driving the beautiful daytime routes, seeing the wild coastline and the green fields. Each morning, the roads ahead felt open and free. My life felt set. The baby was coming. One morning, Padraig, a driver who worked these roads for decades, sat with me during a break. He watched me with serious eyes. "You enjoy the daytime, don't you?" he said. "But the western roads at night, they are different. Things here aren't what they always seem to be." I chuckled. The thought of my unborn child made everything feel bright. I dismissed his warning as old stories. His words did not disappear. They stayed in my mind, a quiet feeling that settled under my contentment. The barren northwestern roads wound through the night, a thick fog closing in. My eyes felt heavy with fatigue, my mind lost in thoughts of my unborn child. A hunched figure suddenly emerged from the curling fog into my headlight beam. The lorry lurched. I felt a heavy thud beneath the wheels. My breath caught. I slammed on the brakes. The lorry skidded to a stop. A cold dread rose in my chest. I scrambled from the cab, my legs unsteady. The fog closed in, damp and cold, as my powerful headlights found a dark shape on the road ahead. I moved towards it, my fear a tight knot. The figure lay twisted on the wet road. My initial dread of an accident spiraled into abject horror. It was naked, a woman by its form, but its belly was swollen, grotesque, and clearly pregnant. Its head, with matted wool and large black eyes, was that of a sheep. Grotesque teats sagged from its chest. On its moving belly, a disturbing spiral symbol had been deeply carved into the flesh. Primal terror seized me. Revulsion twisted my gut, making me choke on the cold air. I did not look back at the impossible creature. I scrambled into the lorry cab, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life. I jammed the gear into drive, pressing the accelerator to the floor, leaving the unspeakable horror behind in the thick fog. The rest of the route was a blur of numb shock. My body functioned, navigating turns and managing the heavy vehicle, but my mind reeled, replaying the grotesque image. My thoughts screamed for home, for the safety of our small house and my wife's presence. I drove without conscious thought, propelled only by a desperate need to escape the memory. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the first light of dawn barely touched the sky. My wife slept soundly in our bed. I could not tell her what I had seen. The words would not form. The horror was too immense, too utterly unbelievable to share with her, especially now with our unborn child growing inside her. The secret settled in me, a cold, heavy weight. I was forever changed by that night. I still drove my lorry working the routes I'd come to love, but I never again drove the northwestern roads after dark. The memory of what I saw haunted my every thought, a constant shadow on the edge of my vision,